Hey, my name is Savannah Sigmund, and I believe most of you are familiar with my family story, but if you're not, when I was 21 weeks pregnant, I suffered a massive brain bleeding stroke, and this church community prayed and carried our family through. Today, I want you to meet my friend, Bethany.
Hello, my name is Bethany Murphy. I've been a member of Real Life Church for just under 3 years. I've been a member of a church from the time I was 8 days old. I graduated from a Christian high school in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It was there that I met my husband and high school sweetheart, Sean. Sorry. Together we have 3 children, Scott, Emma, and Chloe. I have always been an active person. As a child, I was a competitive gymnast. I played soccer. I ran cross country. In college, I ran a half marathon. After having my first 2 children, my activity transferred onto them. I would spend a lot of time in the kitchen cooking. I would take them out for runs in the double stroller. We would do crafts together. Being a mom was hard, but when I found my footing in it, I found tremendous fulfillment in it. Things began to change for me in my last pregnancy. Throughout the pregnancy, I experienced intensely crippling headaches that lasted for only a minute or 2 at a time. They would build in intensity and ultimately fade away. I had this pain throughout all of my pregnancies and ultimately believed it to be a normal experience that all pregnant women dealt with. On August 3rd, 2017, I gave birth to my youngest daughter, Chloe. While the birth was definitely difficult and painful, it seemed otherwise normal. I was discharged in 24 hours like normal. At home, I started to notice things felt a bit off. Namely, I had a pretty bad headache that just wouldn't go away. I assumed it was a spinal headache as I had just given birth. Plus, I was sleep deprived with 3 babies in diapers, so a headache was really to be expected. On August 9th, I woke up and I just felt terrible. I was so exhausted and was having a hard time functioning. Plus, every time I took a deep breath, it felt like my chest was hurting. By mid-afternoon, my mom was really worried about me. I came downstairs after trying to take a nap and failing. She told me my face was completely gray and asked me what I was feeling in my body. I told her that it felt like my chest hurt every time I took a deep breath. Her training as a nurse kicked in, and immediately she checked my pulse. She told me we should probably call an ambulance because my heart rate was down to 39 beats per minute. Somehow, I managed to convince her to just let Sean drive me. However, by the time I made it to the hospital, my heart rate was continuing to drop. By the time I was all checked in, had x-rays taken, and was in a room, my heart rate was in the 30s and dipping into the high 20s. Somehow, I was still completely awake and alert. After some time, I started to have tremendous pain that radiated from my chest down my left arm and up my jaw every time my heart beat. My respiration was also starting to slow. I was put on oxygen. At this point, my heart rate was dipping down to 25 beats per minute. The nurse had to bring in a crash cart just in case my heart stopped. All the while, I was still alert. My ER doctor was at a complete loss for what was wrong with me. It was my heart dropping as much as it was. He ordered atropine. It was at this point I knew things were really wrong. After the atropine was administered, the headache that I still had built into the crippling headaches I felt during my pregnancy. Except this time, it didn't just fade away. This time, it became much, much worse. My body, after fighting so hard to remain alive, began to shut down. I went completely limp in the hospital bed and said out loud to my husband, "I'm dying," before I went completely blind. I remember the pain being so severe, I wanted to scream and writhe, but all I could manage was stillness. My husband alerted the medical staff, who had me flying to a CT scan, where it was discovered that I suffered 2 hemorrhagic or bleeding strokes. The heart symptoms and the breathing issues were all signs that my brainstem was so swollen that it was pushing out of my skull. It was moments away from completely herniating, but somehow I survived. This was just the beginning. I spent 2.5 weeks in the hospital and was discharged with relatively little damage from the strokes that I was aware of. I was eager to get back home and have things go back to normal. However, life as I knew it was forever changed. I could no longer be the energetic mom that I used to be. In fact, getting by day to day was hard. I discovered that I was extremely sensitive to bright lights and sounds. Hearing my kids cry could trigger a migraine. I had to spend a lot of time in a dark room with noise-canceling headphones on to get by. Life was really isolating. Most people who have hemorrhagic strokes don't survive them, and if they do, the deficiencies are severe. My own neurologist told me that he had 12 patients with the same condition I did. Of the 12, 10 are deceased. The other remaining survivor lost the ability to speak or eat. So here I was, a walking, talking miracle, but I was lonelier than ever. There are no support groups for moms who have survived brain bleeds. My family lived in a different state. There was just my husband, my 3 kids in diapers, and myself. On October of 2021, my husband woke up in the middle of the night with an urgency that we needed to move. I was all for it and said, "Great, where are we moving to?" With all the conviction and confidence of someone who is led by God, he said, "Stanley, North Carolina." In my mind, I was wondering what on earth was in Stanley. We remained faithful though. We managed to snag our absolute dream home and moved in on December 23rd, 2021. After moving in, we started in on the process of finding a home church. However, at this point in my life, I was pretty angry with God. It had been 5 years since having the strokes, and I still had frequent migraines. I was still sensitive to light and noises. Worse than ever, though, was my crippling fatigue. I struggled to make it out of bed most days and was completely out of energy by noon. I begged and begged for God to heal me, but he seemed to remain silent. I had also experienced some church hurt. I couldn't pour into ministries like I used to be able to, and that led to resentment. All of this built towards me being done with church and furious with God. My husband, though, continued to take our 3 children until they came across a church called Real Life Church. My husband absolutely adored the children's ministry. They would gather in the kitchen and sing worship songs together that they learned on Sunday. Their favorite was Honey in the Rock. After 3 weeks of my family attending Real Life without me, my kids begged for me to go too. Begrudgingly, I decided that I would attend the next Sunday. The pastor at the time, Pastor Mike, delivered a sermon that Sunday about being a warrior for God. For some reason, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I wondered how on earth I was possibly supposed to be a warrior for God when I struggled to get out of bed in the morning. So like any other person, enraged by the sermon, I stomped up to him during the altar call and asked him exactly that. His response absolutely changed my life. He said, "First of all, I'm sorry you went through that. Second of all, I'll pray for you. Last of all, let me introduce you to someone." I followed behind him, somewhat bewildered, as he led me to the back corner of the church where a woman with a cane and a smile was sitting. Pastor Mike introduced me to her by saying, "Bethany, this is Savannah. Savannah, this is Bethany. She has a story similar to yours." And then he walked away. Savannah gestured to the seat next to her and said, "Come and tell me your story." I began to completely pour out my heart to Savannah about surviving 2 brain bleeds, about how hard life had been since then, about how alone and misunderstood I felt in the world. As I told her more of my story, Savannah's face turned into one of shocked wonder. As it turned out, she had also had a brain bleed surrounding her pregnancy. She also survived against all the odds. She was also struggling as a disabled mom. Suddenly, it made complete sense to me why God wanted us to move to Stanley, North Carolina, because what are the odds of 2 young moms having such a deadly condition and finding each other at a church in a small town? I haven't run the numbers, but I get the feeling that we were looking at miracle odds. Before I left the church that day, Savannah and I exchanged numbers. One of the very first texts she sent to me said, "I hope this isn't too crazy, but we have to be best friends now." Savannah had a time prying me from the hard shell that I had surrounded myself in. I think I spent the first several months of our friendship lamenting to her. And by lamenting, I meant whining, because I was definitely whining. There's something about talking to someone, though, who understands you that is just so healing. Slowly but surely, I could feel myself opening up to her friendship more. She also had such a joy around her that was infectious. Whenever I would inquire as to why, she would point me back to Jesus. However, while I was accepting of a new friend in my life, I still wasn't quite ready to open myself back up to God. I felt so hurt by him, and I was still struggling physically. In May of 2023, I went to the doctor because I kept getting nosebleeds. While there, he noticed that I had a sizable lump in my neck. I was sent to get a CT when I was given the devastating news. I had thyroid cancer. The first person I told other than my husband was Savannah. I knew she would get it. Somehow I knew she would feel just as angry as I was. When I told her, though, she was not only just as angry as me, she was in fact angrier. I just know God heard a mouthful from her over the next several days, and knowing this made me feel so much better. Savannah and Brett were there the day I had surgery to remove my thyroid and lymph nodes. They sat with my husband in the waiting room while the surgery was underway. They also came and visited me while I recovered. Savannah texted me and sent prayer requests out for me as I had minor complications from the surgery. She brought over dinner when I returned home. When I had radiation, I had to go into isolation from my family and friends for a week. Savannah heard that and said, "Challenge accepted." I was alone in that room, but Savannah made it her mission to keep me company via text. I had never felt truly alone through the process. She has been there through every blood draw and imaging appointment ever since. I think she celebrated the hardest when I finally received the news in December 2024 that there was no cancer to be seen on any of the imaging or blood tests.
Woohoo!
I'm now so happy to go to church. I've started attending MOPS and I've been able to share my story with other moms. My own relationship with God is healing. I no longer feel bitter, but thankful. What an amazing story of God's compassion and faithfulness that I get to share. What a blessing it is to share the numerous miracles that have occurred in my life. I'm also thankful for not only the church I call home, but my friend Savannah. She is truly a warrior for God.
There are not enough words to express what my friendship with Bethany has meant to me, and I'm just thankful to Jesus every day that he gifted this friend to me.